afternoon. My name is AFREH CAHRITY, and my presentation is on the International Trade Regulatory Framework as a strategic driver of competitive advantage. So basically, the International Trade Regulatory Framework is the system of rules and agreements that govern how countries trade with each other. The main institution is the World Trade Organization, which sets global trade rules. There are also regional and bilateral agreements like USMCA and others that gives special trade benefits between certain countries. The important point here is that this framework is not just about restrictions, it creates a strategic environment that business must understand to stay competitive. Why is it important? This system is important for four main reasons. First, predictability. Business know the rules and can plan ahead. Second, efficiency. It reduces transaction cost in trade. We also have fairness. It promotes fair competition between countries. And finally, security. It, if disputes arise, countries can settle them legally. Now, let's look at the core pillars that directly affect businesses. The first is tariffs, which are taxes on imports. So if tariffs are reduced through trade agreements, products becomes cheaper and more competitive. The second is non-tariff measures such as quotas. These can sometimes restrict trade even more than tariffs. The third is trade remedies like anti-dumping, anti-dumping duties, which protect local industries from unfair foreign competition. Next are the technical and safety standards. So it ensures products meet health and environmental requirements. Finally, we have the intellectual property rights, which protects patents, trademarks, and innovation from being copied. All these pillars affect business costs, pricing, and overall competitiveness. Now, here is the key idea. Trade regulation is not only a constraint, it's also an opportunity. Companies can use trade agreements to enter new markets with low tariffs. They can improve supply chains through simplified customs procedures and by protecting intellectual property globally. They create long-term competitive advantage. So smart firms don't just follow the rules, they use the rules strategically. Companies can, with the strategic versus reactive regulatory approaches, companies can either be proactive or reactive. So proactive companies anticipate regulatory changes and integrate trade strategy into their planning. Reactive companies also respond after rules change, which often leads to higher costs and disruptions. Clearly, being proactive allows firms to gain first mover advantage.
Yes, so I'll continue with the strategic versus reactive regulatory approaches. So, the proactive company treats regulations like a radar system. They anticipate shifts, model scenarios, engage in policy decisions. When rules change, they are already positioned. The reactive company tests regulations like a rearview mirror. They only notices change after the fact, when shipment stops, when auditors arrive, and when margin vanishes. So let's we are we are saying that proactive or strategic engagement, anticipate regulatory shifts. It also integrates trade into core strategy, invests in intelligence and technology, and captures first mover advantage. While on the other hand, reactive or compliance approach engagement focuses on respond only after rules change and focuses on minimum legal requirements, relies on ad hoc last minute fixes, bears avoidable costs. Consequences of neglecting trade regulations and operations consequences. When firms neglect trade regulations, the damage cascades. Operational consequences. Operational failure Operational failure stops at the border. Wrong documentation shipments halt production. Under laws like the UFLPA, one mistake can paralyze entire supply chain indefinitely. Financial consequences. Cost multiply. Settlement reached tens of millions. Saratizet USA paid 54 million US dollars last year for misclassification. Beyond fines, retroactive duties, legal fees, and the silent loss of market share while competitors keep moving. And then reputational consequences. Regulatory sanctions and loss of trusted trader status. Brand damages due to what customers losing trust in your company. The damage is often fatal. Sanctions go global, public. Partners walk away, customers lose trust, a compliance failure questions your integrity, and that's hard to recover from. Trade regulatory is a fragmented global economy, geographical fragmentation, and protectionism. Rising unilateral tariffs by the US led in manufacturing, sanctions and economic security prioritize creating volatility. Rise of regional trade blocs like the USMCA, July 2026 joint review, potential higher ROOs, and RCEP, deepening intra-Asia trade, buffering fragmentation, and then EU strategic autonomy, CBAM, significant regime, January, imposing carbon compliance. Increasing regulatory complexity for firms, patchwork of tariffs, export control, customs scrutiny, higher documentation demand, and reconfiguration costs. SMEs face disproportionate burdens due to limited capital. Strategic evaluation. The so what? Is trade regulation more critical than price or product features? Price doesn't matter if a 20%, 25% tariff makes you uncompetitive at the border. Innovation doesn't matter if new standards exclude your product entirely. Regulation says before the game, it determines whether you get to play at all. So here's the truth. Regulatory intelligence is no longer support its core. Firms that monitor, model, and navigate gain first mover advantage, avoid costs before they hit, and build resilience that become a barrier to entry for competitors. So, in conclusion, central argument restated. In today's global geopolitical charged environment, trade regulation determines market access, cost structure, resilience, and long-term viability, far more than traditional factors. Strategic and operational implementation, proactive engagement unlocks first mover advantage, supply chain optimization, and intellectual property protection, and risk mitigation. Reactive approaches invite delays, penalty, disruptions, loss share, and reputational harm. My final judgment on is trade regulatory mastery is not optional. It is the paramount survival and success factor in the 2026 fragmented global economy. Firms that embedded regulatory intelligence at their strategic core will lead and will prevail than others who don't. Thank you.